Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of And Then What? I'm your host, Cathy Earle, and I'm so happy you're here to kick off this journey with me. In this podcast, we're diving into the world of plastic pollution. From the moment plastic is produced to the moment it ends up in our oceans and landfills, and even in the products that we use. Plastic is everywhere. And the goal of this podcast is to explore its impact on our planet and our health, and talk about some of the practical steps we can take to reduce our reliance on plastic. I aim to raise awareness around plastic pollution and spark meaningful conversations. This podcast won't just talk about implementing simple solutions like cutting back on straws or taking your own bags to the grocery store. Well, those are great things to do. However, myself, along with some guests, will discuss the systems behind plastic production, its life cycle, and the many ways it's become woven into every part of our lives. This podcast will be the start of many conversations about overconsumption, ways to reduce plastic waste, and how to live more sustainably. Together, we can make a difference, one choice at a time. Now let's take a moment to reflect on just how much plastic we use every day. Think about it. Everything from the food we buy, the packaging, the clothes we wear, to our hygiene products, plastic is almost always part of the equation. And the scary part? Plastic doesn't just disappear. Once it's made, it eventually breaks down into tiny particles, known as microplastics. Microplastics are found in our oceans, in our soil, and even our drinking water. Studies estimate that the average person consumes about a credit card's worth of plastic every week. Since the 1950s, it's estimated that over 8.3 billion tons of plastic have been produced. Let that sink in. 8.3 billion tons. And of that, only about 9% has ever been recycled. The rest either sits in landfills, litters the environment, or gets incinerated, releasing toxic chemicals into the air. So why does any of this matter? Because plastic waste affects ecosystems, endangers wildlife, and even poses risks to human health. But despite the scale of the problem, there is hope. Around the world, people are waking up to the plastic crisis. Communities are banding together to clean up beaches and waterways. Scientists are developing alternatives to petroleum-based plastics. And businesses are rethinking the way they package and produce goods. This podcast, And Then What, is here to question why are we still producing so much plastic? And in particular, and then what happens to it after we're done with it? We'll dig into the ugly side of plastic waste, but also celebrate the positive changes that are already taking place. In upcoming episodes, we'll cover everything from the hidden plastics in our everyday lives to the role corporations and governments have in reducing waste. We'll discuss practical tips for living a plastic-free lifestyle and discuss ways to make sustainable living easier and more affordable. This podcast is about taking steps, no matter how small, that move us in the right direction. This podcast has been brought to you by Earth. That's Earth with an O. eorth. Earth is your go-to store for plastic-free, zero-waste products. And as a special thank you for listening, you can use the code AND THEN WHAT to receive 15% off your first purchase. Head to eorth.au today. Now that's a wrap for today's episode of And Then What? Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join me on this very first episode. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, or if you have topics of interest that you'd love covered in upcoming episodes, drop a comment below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can be notified when our next podcast drops. Remember, every small step we take toward reducing plastic waste can lead to big changes. Together we can create a brighter, more sustainable future. I hope you'll join me next week for the next episode of And Then What?